What's going on, chess friends? It's Grandmaster Max Illingworth here, and in this video I will be showing you how you can review all of your chess games at once in both lichess.org, as we see here, and also on chess.com, like we see here. Now this is how it will look when you are reviewing your chess games, and in this video I will show you how to get to these amazing features on these two chess playing servers, and I will show you how you can use this reviewing of your games to draw the right conclusions to improve your chess, and in this case especially improve your openings. Now if you enjoyed this video, make sure to smash that like button and definitely subscribe to the channel, especially if this is one of your very first videos of mine that you are watching. With that being said, it's now time to begin seeing how we get to this stage. So let's start from the beginning. Let's go to the home page of Lichess, which on your browser, when you open Google Chrome or whatever browser you like to use, or maybe you're using the Lichess app on a mobile, just make sure that you're in Lichess or whatever device you use. And then what we're going to do, step one, is we're going to go to the Learn tab. Don't actually click the Learn tab, just go down in that menu, and then drag your mouse down to Study, which we are clicking on here. And then once we're in Study, you can create a new study for this purpose just by going to this orange button on the top right hand corner of the screen. So for our purpose, I'm just going to click Create Study to show you how it will look on your end. And the study is a really great feature, which actually many great videos have already been done on the topic, and there are a lot of very powerful features which I could easily talk about a lot. But for now, I'm just going to focus just on one particular very new feature that has been introduced by lichess.org, which is basically how to review your own games in the Lichess study. You'll notice here that I've set the visibility to invite only, because if you make it public, anybody can see your study, and maybe potentially other people will see what openings you play or what openings you are preparing. So to avoid that, just click invite only, and that will make the study private. Just make sure to click that start button on the bottom right hand corner here, and then that will create a new study. So as chapter 1, I'm just going to scroll down and just click create chapter, as you can see here on the pop-up. It might look a little bit different if you're on a mobile device, but the steps are going to be more or less the same. And I'm going to show you how I get this feature, where you might notice this thing called the Opening Explorer. If I just turn it off, this is how your screen might look when you access the Lichess study on your first time. So then the way we access the Opening Explorer, which is what we'll be using to review our games, is to click on this book button, which is just to the southeast of the H1 square, on the bottom right hand corner of our chessboard, light on the right, as they say. So we click the book icon, but it might look a little bit different to you. Maybe, for example, you might have the Masters game set, and so it might look like this for you at first. So how do we change this setting so that we can see our own games and look at our own games that we've played? Well, what we do is we click on this cog icon that you can see here just on the top right of this Opening Explorer screen. We click that, and you'll notice in the past I only had either the Masters database, which is what we just saw there, with the number of games and the percentage score for each move played in the database. And then there was also the Lichess database, where you could look up games of different rating levels and different time controls, which in itself is a very powerful feature. But in this video, I'm only going to be talking about the new player feature, which basically allows us to look up our games that we've played on the server in the past. So for example, you can see that my username here is Craze, that I'm GM Craze on Lichess. But what you're going to do is you're going to type in your username, so you can click here, and you can also search by username. So let's say if, for example, we search, be a good example, let's say like Chessy Bread, which is not actually a username, but like Chessy B, like say if you want to search this, then you would show this player's games if this was your new username. But in this case, I'm just going to type in my username, or in this case, I already have it and it actually remembers it. So I can do this, and now it shows Craze's games as white. So if I click on this X button, what you're going to see is all of the games I've played on Lichess with the white pieces. And this also is a feature you can use to look up the games of other players as well. Let's say, for example, if you know you're going to play someone maybe in a tournament and you know their Lichess username, you can use this to actually look up their games and prepare for them. But for now, I'm just going to talk about this in terms of looking at our own games, where with this we can see not just the openings that we play most often. So you can see here that I mostly play d4, not in the majority of my games, but more than any of the other individual moves. But we can also see the percentage score here. We can see that I score like 81% win rate with the move 1 d4, which is a pretty good score percentage. But we can see that my score with a move knight f3, my second most common move, is even better. Whereas, relatively speaking, my score with e4 is not quite as strong. We can draw these early conclusions, but we can also go a lot deeper and explore our games further down this tree of variations, as I like to call it. The reason it's called a tree is because the variations just sort of branch out, like a Christmas tree. So, for example, we play the move knight f6, we see that I'm playing quite a few different moves, but that most of the time I'm playing the move knight to f3, and having fairly decent results for the most part, and then after g6 playing mostly the London system with bishop f4 in my Lichess games. Now, depending on how you play, maybe you have a very narrow repertoire and that you play the same thing virtually every game with white or with black, or maybe you have a very broad range of openings and you play a lot of different openings with white and with the black pieces, but still you can use it to draw some conclusions. For example, one we could see here is that my score against bishop to g7 is pretty good, with 3 wins and 1 draw. And also, if we scroll down here, you can actually see that I have my most recent games as well listed. So you can see that I had also not just the games I played, but also the ratings of my opponents, which can allow me then to draw some conclusions just based on the results. Now, of course, to do this deeply, it is true that you will want to actually analyze your games, but this can at least give you a general idea of what openings you score the best in and which ones you maybe don't score as well in. And, of course, the more games you've played, the more reliable this data is going to be. So you can see that my 1 draw was from 2018. And we can also see that my score against d5 is not as good by comparison, and therefore it's a line I may want to study in the future in order to have a better idea of how to play the London when they play in a Grunfeld style with d5, knight f6, and g6. And of course you can look at this with other lines as well, where, for example, if we take knight f3, we can see that my score on these lines is very good, but the line where my opponents are scoring best is moves like c5 or moves like g6. Again, the sample size is not so huge, but we can certainly look and see, okay, someone won a game against me where they played the move g6, and it was actually a game played earlier in 2021. So again, I may want to review that game. Also, it is worth pointing out for those of you who are really unfamiliar with the Lichess studies that you can turn on the engine, the way we turn on the Stockfish engine, the strongest chess engine in the world at the time of this video, is we click on this button in the top right, just to the right of where it says Stockfish 14 plus NNUE in local browser. We click it here, and then I could play the moves in my game and see, okay, maybe at some point I'm going to play a little bit differently to what I did in this game. For example, instead of the move c3, the computer says at depth 40 that the move c4 is a little bit stronger, transposing back into an English opening where I can go knight c3 and maybe try to push in the center with d4, depending on what move they play. Of course, it's not the end of the story. A professional player would certainly analyze this a lot more deeply, but it's one way in which you could steadily improve your opening repertoire by seeing what you played previously and then reviewing the game and then getting the engine to find a better move than what you played, and then to maybe play that better move in your next game. And if it's just one move at a time, if you keep doing this, it is going to allow you to just make your opening stronger and stronger. So that's an easy way to review all of your games at once, and we've seen a couple of practical applications of it in this case. Now you might be wondering, well, Max, how exactly do you review your black games? We've seen how to review white. It's actually super easy. All you have to do is once you've typed in your username, it automatically goes to, in this case, Craze as white, or whatever username that you put in for the earlier step. You just click that, and then it reverses to from black's perspective as such. And if you want to, you could also create a new chapter where you might call this like the black games instead of the white games if you want to keep it sort of separate. Otherwise, if you have, the white games and the black games in just one game, that might be a little bit confusing. And also, you'll notice that when I create this new chapter, it reset to craze as white. So I'm just going to click that and make it craze as black. Now, some of you may also, when you are playing with the black pieces, obviously, most of you are looking at the board from black's point of view, right? So a very easy thing you can do is you can click on this cog, the settings icon for the chapter that you're in, and you can just change your orientation from white to black. And what you're going to see is when I do that and then click Save Chapter, is it's now going to show the board from black's point of view. Of course, every time you do this, you do have to reset the craze as white to craze as black, so that's something to keep in mind. But if we look at this, we can again draw similar conclusions that if they play the move e4, that I've played a lot of different openings here. As you can see, I have quite a broad opening repertoire, but the system I play most often is the Sicilian. And really we can see that my results of the Sicilian are not quite as good as with some other openings like the Alekan or Scandinavian or Caracan or French, but also the sample size for those is a bit smaller. And also one fact that is worth considering, a little bit of an advanced point to keep in mind for you guys, is that it may well be that you're not scoring as well with a particular move because you're mostly playing it against relatively strong players, where maybe, for example, in this case, I mainly play the Sicilian against other relatively high-rated players, whereas the other moves I play I play in unrated games against much lower-rated players. So that's something to keep in mind, that the best setting score doesn't necessarily tell you everything. You're going to want to look at how strong your opponents are as well to see how well you're performing relative to your rating. But going back here, we can see that the main Sicilian I play, as we explore the lines, is knight c6. And then if they play the open Sicilian with d4, I'd take, and then normally play the move g6, the accelerated dragon. But we can also see that my results with the accelerated dragon have not been that great, that I've had a couple of losses to, well, okay, these players were only slightly lower rated than me at the time, but still it gives a sign that perhaps these lines I've been playing maybe are not the best fit for my style. Though admittedly a sample of 5 games is not that much, and I would personally warn you guys against dropping an opening just because you lost one game, because sometimes it takes time actually studying an opening and actually playing it a lot of games before you really get that natural feel for it and get really good at playing the positions. So for example, if we take knight c3, bishop to g7, and sort of look at the game I played where I lost in this, we can sort of see that my loss was basically a result of not really knowing the opening theory well enough, where after castles, just bear me a moment, sometimes with Lichess, if your connection drops a little bit, it takes a bit of time for the moves to come on the board, so just be a little patient with that. So you can see, for example, I had a game where I played this waiting move of rook e8, which sort of has the idea that after f3 that you can play e6 and try to hit back with the move d5 in the center, and sort of change up the play a bit to sort of stop their usual queen d2 castles and this sort of hack attack. But then my opponent also changed tack with the move d4, with move f4 I should say. And we can see that I didn't really respond to this in the best way, where by turning on the engine we can see that instead of the move d6 I played, well, maybe d6 is not such a bad move in all fairness, but we can see that a move like knight g4 is favoured by the engine at a higher depth with the idea of going queen g4 and knight d4. Though again, going a bit deeper, we can see that the engine does sometimes change its mind when you give it more time to think, and it thinks that this position after castles takes an a b3 is very good for white, just going for e5 and kind of leaving this d7 pawn as a major backward pawn. So try to keep in mind, like, don't just look at the engine here and just say, okay, this is the move I'm going to play because the engine says so. You might want to explore the lines a little bit more deeply. For example, like a d6, and after queen f3, actually I probably played knight db5, and yeah, this is where I self-destructed because I didn't know about the theory in this position, and I didn't know about this computer idea of playing rook e7 and, sacrificing the pawn, but getting this good play down the d file in return. It is admittedly a very complex example, and to be honest, my conclusion here would probably be maybe I should just play the move d6 instead and transpose back into a normal dragon position, but where at least they're committed to bishop to b3, which can give you some extra options like knight d4 and b5 is one idea. Okay, maybe going a little bit too much into specifics for a review video, but I think it's useful also to see how a grandmaster actually approaches the process of reviewing the game and coming up with a better way to play the opening next time. Because because we can see that knight d4 is a little bit stronger than my rook c8 move in the game. And just because I won that game doesn't necessarily mean I can't improve my opening play for next time. With this feature of the Lichess Personal Opening Explorer, you can improve on your wins as well as improve on your losses. And that's going to give you the fastest improvement of all, to give you my pro tip as a coach. Now, of course, there are other lines they can play where, you obviously you're not just going to look at the main lines, but you're probably going to look at how you deal with different sidelines. For example, after bishop b5, we see that I've basically relied on the move pawn to g6 in reply. I've played this in all three of these games with 2 wins and a draw. So a line that has served me, or actually more precisely 2 draws and a win. So it's a line where while my results haven't been all that bad, I might also want to look at these lines and see, okay, how might I play it next time in order to not get a position where my opponent can just play very safely, where I can maybe try to unbalance it a bit more and play more for a win against a lower rated player. So also if we go back to the starting position, we can see that after the move pawn d4, that my most common defense has been knight f6. I've played this in a significant majority of the games. And then after c4, my main move here in Lichess games has been to play c5, and then meet d5 with b5 and play the Benko gambit. And we can see that the Benko has served me quite well, that I have a score of 86% wins in my games, and have even beaten some quite decently rated players, as you can see from the recent games. Though, of course, it is true I can also go deeper and see, for example, that the line that white has scored best with in the games I've played have been lines like b takes a6 and b6. So obviously I could also review those losses I had. Also, at one point, if you do want to just look at the game that you played, let's say if you just want to review this loss, what you can do is you can actually click on the game, and then when you click on the game, it gives you these options of view, cite, insert, and close. So if you click on view, what it's going to do is it's going to open the game in a new tab where you can see it like this as such and see all the different moves and so on and so forth. I just close this tab for our purposes, and you could play through the moves and review that way. Personally, I kind of like to have it all in the study, because the difference when you review it in the study versus if you just review it in a new window is that, let's say if you insert the game, it saves all of the information, where you can actually go back to this game later and then review the analysis that you did. So let's say, for example, if I were to go back to the Lichess homepage and you want to know, well, how exactly do I review the study that I created? The answer is, again, you go to the Learn tab, you click on Study from the drop-down menu, like we did at the start of this video. And then after Study, we go to My Studies. Now, if you maybe have this maybe in a study that, let's say if you have a coach maybe or a friend who perhaps has gone through your openings for you and they create their own study, you would click on Studies I contribute to and then follow the same steps. But here I'm going to go to My Studies, and then I'm just going to click on Crazy's Study, which I've created to allow you to enjoy this feature. And then we're exactly back where we were before. And if I click on this opening book, the Opening Explorer table base here, you're going to see that it comes up once again. Though it does say Crazy's white, you do need to click it again for it to come up with Crazy's black, or in whatever case your username that you have. So yeah, that's pretty much how you review your chess games on Lichess. I'd also do make sure to comment below with, how you intend to use this feature to be able to improve your chess. Now, I also want to show you how you can review your chess games on chess.com. The way in which you're going to use the feature is pretty much the same, but of course the steps are slightly different. So as I showed you at the start of this video, this is how it should look on chess.com in an Opening Explorer. But let's also learn how we actually get here, all the steps. Actually, here it's even easier on chess.com probably than it is on Lichess. So what we do is, let's say I just go to the home page. I just click here, and that will take me to the homepage chess.com today, where you can see all the chess news articles and so forth. So what we do from here is we go to this tab. So it's the one that has the teacher's hat, or maybe it's the pupil's hat actually, not the teacher's hat. So anyway, it's the fifth icon down on this drop-down menu on the top left. Obviously, if you're using the mobile app, it's a tiny bit different, but it's still, I think the icons are in the same place on your mobile as well. And you can still use the same feature because I have used the Opening Explorer on mobile as well. And then what you do is you click on Explorer. It's the last option here on the menu. As you can see me click it. So we go to Explorer. And then when you go to Explorer, it automatically will show master games. So how do we review our own games that we've played on chess.com? Well, the nice thing is you don't even have to enter your username for this. If you're logged in on your usual account, I'm logged in on Illingworth, which is my chess.com username. Then you can just click here on the drop-down menu just below Explorer, on the top right. And then we just click on My Games. And it will show all your games with white. Now, one thing I didn't explain with the Lichess, it was a feature on there that I didn't explain because I thought it might be a bit overcomplicated. But you can actually not just select all your games, but you can also select different time controls. So let's say if you mainly play daily chess, you can select that. Or you might just select your blitz games or just your rapid games and see how often you play different moves, because maybe in bullet games you're just mucking around and you're not taking it all that seriously and you just want to review one particular time control. For our purposes here, I'm going to review all the games, and you can see that I've played quite a lot of games here on chess.com. A lot more than I've played on Lichess, that's for sure. And here we can see the results are a little bit different, that I've actually played the move e4 on chess.com more than the move 1d4. And again, going into lines, of course, here the story is a little bit different because on chess.com I played a very wide range of openings. So for example, against a Sicilian, I've mostly played, well, if you take the most common system, I've played the open Sicilian. But you can see I played a whole lot of other moves as well, like knight c3, d4, c3, and a host of other moves numerous times. Of course, this would mean I'd be very difficult for someone to actually seriously prepare for. But if we take my most common variation, we can see that I most often play the move d4, which I play just a little bit more often than the Moscow variation with bishop b5, which is one of the anti-Sicilians, whereas d4 is the mainline open Sicilian. And again, we can just go down the rabbit hole, see what we play against the most common lines by our opponent, that after knight c3 and the knight off of a6. Well, here again, you can sort of draw your own conclusions, where admittedly most of the games I play are unrated games against players far lower rated than myself. So my statistics are sort of very heavily skewed in my favor as such. You can see I have a 100% score with the move bishop e3, and that I've also played the move bishop g5 nearly as often. So we could certainly go down the lines and I could see, okay, these are the lines that have been serving me well, that I've had very good results playing the English attack with f3 and going g4, g5, which by the way I do consider to be probably the best system against the knight off if I was pressed to single out one system. So it makes sense if you're having really good results for an opening to kind of stick with it because, well, if you're winning with it, why change? But it might be another system you're playing where maybe your results are not quite as good. To give an example, if we take the, what would be a good example? Let's say if I take e5 and I explore the Roy Lopez. Because if you actually looked at my over-the-board chess games back when I was a chess professional, playing in over-the-board tournaments a lot, and those games I was actually mostly playing the Spanish. Here you can see that I've played the Italian game and the Scotch a bit more often, but if we take bishop b5, we can sort of see that in certain lines I haven't been scoring all that well. For example, if we take the most common a6, bishop a4, knight f6, you can sort of see my score start to drop a bit. That, for example, the move d3 I've played in some games has been a move that my score has been quite bad with. I've lost a game against d6. Now, one difference compared to the chess.com feature compared to the Lichess feature is that it's a lot harder, I think, to analyze your games in the opening explorer. I can see there's this button that says computer, but if I click that, what it does is it just plays me against the computer from that position. It doesn't actually give me the analysis of the position. So if you're going to want to analyze the moves in chess.com, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to be a little bit creative, and you're going to have to create a new window. So let's say if I just go to chess.com here and just wait for that to load. If I want to analyze this, I would have to basically, as I just try to get this working again, I would have to go to this tab here, still the same, 1/5 one down with the hat, and I would have to click on analysis. And then when I click on analysis, then I could do something similar to what we have in Lichess, where I could turn on the engine, just, with, try to figure out how to do this. Okay, you just make a move on the board and the analysis automatically comes up. So I'd have to do it like this, and obviously it's a lot less convenient than on Lichess because you have to, switch back and forth. Like, if let's say you want to look up d6, then you'd have to go here and then enter the move d6. So it's definitely a lot more fiddly, but even so, you can still use the chess.com Opening Explorer to at least review your games and at least see what lines you're statistically performing well in, and what lines you're maybe not performing so well in. So based on this, we can kind of see that I should probably stick to the move castle so it suits me better. And then after bishop e7 that I have a 100% score of rook e1. And actually I remember from my own experience that one of my wins in this variation, or actually two of my wins, were actually against quite high-rated players, because Michael Q to d5 and Nuki are actually both grandmasters, and the fact I managed to beat two grandmasters in this line suggests that this is probably a line that suits my style quite well, and that I should continue playing in this sort of way in the future. And likewise, if we took the example of the Berlin, which of course is a line that has a very good reputation at a high level, we can see that again my results with the d3 anti-Berlin are not that good. So here you might see a pattern. I don't really understand the d3 lines in the Royal Pez as well as I think, and therefore it's probably better for me to just play castles and to play a more mainline approach like knight e4, rook e1 or something like this. So anyway, I could go a lot deeper. Of course, there are a lot of other lines I could look at. For example, I have played the move d4 quite a lot, but again, of course, when you look at my games on different sites, you will notice some differences, that maybe you play one repertoire on one website and maybe you play a different repertoire on another website. Because one thing that's worth keeping in mind, because of course, you know, at the time I'm recording this video, COVID lockdowns have sort of finished in a lot of countries and there are a lot more over-the-board tournaments. So if you play on chess.com or Lichess under your actual name, it makes it much easier for people to find your profile and use your online game to prepare against you, because obviously you're going to have a lot more online games probably than you have games in the standard, you know, chess-based databases, right? So what I might do is I might look at this and see, okay, this guy plays the Queen's Gambit approach a lot, and he often allows an IMSO Indian, and then does a whole bunch of systems like e3, f3, knight f3, and some other moves. You can see I've really played a lot of different things against an IMSO, because an IMSO is a very difficult opening to prove an advantage against. Now, one of the limitations of looking at the games in this way, and this is maybe more relevant when you're preparing for your opponents, but still something to keep in mind, is that it only tells you the number of games played. It doesn't actually tell you when these games were played. So, for example, I know that actually recently from this position I've been most often playing the move Queen to c2 at this point, but the database won't tell you that. It just will tell you that in the past I mostly played e3, followed by knight f3, followed by the move knight f3. A small point as well to keep in mind is that this database does include transpositions. So when it says I played 14 games with knight f3, what it actually means is that I've played 14 games that lead to the position after knight f3, including transpositions. So it may well be that maybe I only played knight f3, let's say, in 5 games from that position, but I reached this position via different move orders another 9 times. I can see it here. If you count the number of games that have been played from this position, you can see that it adds up to a lot more than 14. That actually, if we take the move d5, that's already 17 games that have reached that position just in my white games. So it's a small point to keep in mind that the opening tree does factor in transpositions, and that does make it easier for you to kind of keep track of, well, how many games you've played from different lines and to be able to kind of keep your repertoire consistent. Because let's say, for example, let's say you normally play knight f3 and you have something against d5, but in this case, let's say if they played a d5 move order, let's say like if you almost always played knight c3, you can see that there's a slight inconsistency that with this move order, I mostly play knight c3, whereas with the other move order, like you have the knight committed to f3, meaning that obviously you have more options here in a certain sense, where with the knight c3 you have options like c takes d5 and bishop g5. Well, mainly the exchange relation with cd5 that would not be as effective if you already had the knight on f3. Whereas conversely, if you played knight to f3 instead, we can see that here, I mean, you have options like playing the move pawn g3 in the Catalan, which is not as effective if you already have the knight on c3. So little subtle move order points like this are definitely worth considering as you review your chess games to check if there are any inconsistencies in the openings you play when factoring in the transpositions. But that's a very advanced point, and if you're rated below, let's say, 14 at 1600, you probably don't have to worry too much about this, but just a more advanced point for our viewers. So, of course, if you want to look at your black games on chess.com, it's actually really easy. What you do is you go, from the top of the screen, you just go down to the menus to where it says whites, and then you just change that to black. And if you want to go back to white, you'll just click the drop-down menu and just click white once again, and that would take you back. And in order to flip the board, it's slightly more complex than on Lichess, but not by much. you just go to the settings cog, you just hover over that, and then you can just flip board. It has, the, switch around symbol, as you can see, but, it comes and goes until you hover around this area, so that's why it sometimes can be hard to find. But just go hover over settings, click the flip board, and you'll have it from black's point of view. And now if we look here, we can see again that after e4, that I've played a lot of different first moves a lot of times, but that considering that there have been nearly 4,000 games where I faced e4, we can see that I played a move c5 the Sicilian in a bit more than 1/4 of the games. Of course, if you were trying to prepare for me, you'd have a bit of a headache trying to look at all these lines, but you would see that, at least historically, I played c5 most often, followed by the other main line of 1e5. So what is the most common line I play after c5? Well, historically, it actually turns out to be the same as on Lichess, that the most common system is with d4, playing the knight c6, because actually, as a kid, I played the Sveshnikov almost exclusively as my defense to 1e4. Those who are wondering, who maybe haven't seen a ton of my YouTube videos, the Sveshnikov is where you play knight f6, knight c3, and e5. And you can see that I have actually played this in a bunch of games, but it's not my most common system in all of the games I've played, though I have played the Accelerated Dragon more often. And again, this is something to keep in mind that, obviously, you can see that while my score with the Accelerated Dragon wasn't very good when I looked at the Lichess study, that my score here is very good with a win rate of nearly 80% here. And this also includes a lot of games in rated blitz against some high-rated players, so my overall performance rating is pretty strong, and we can see that... Okay, I already looked at knight c3 in the Lichess study, so I'm going to take the Maroczy bind with c4 as the example, because it's a move where my opponents have scored a little bit better. You can see I've played a lot of different systems, but that more often I've played the Gurgenidze system, where you play knight f6, and then you play the move d6. And the idea of delaying bishop g7, which I actually managed to get in a game quite recently against a strong FIDE master in blitz, is if they go bishop e3, which is what they normally do if you played like bishop g7 and delayed d6, then you've got the move knight g4, and you can sort of annoy their bishop, and it just gives you a very good game, basically. Admittedly, the details of this are not really the topic of the video, but you can certainly explore it if you're so inclined. So normally my opponents have played bishop e2, but then I play knight d4, and I kind of lure their queen into a somewhat vulnerable position where there might be some discovered attack at some point. And then after bishop e3, we can see that after castles and queen d2, that I've had very good results with this move a5, which is a little bit of a specialty of mine, where you just play like a4, you go bishop e6, queen a5, rook c8, and just pile the pressure on c4. And then you're putting a pawn a4, as if they go b3, you can trade it off and get your rook on a8 into the game. Now, maybe you can see that even in this position, my results actually haven't been all that great for black, that I had this loss to Komodo after rook c1. Okay, anyone will probably lose to a computer for the most part, unless you get a little bit lucky, like you catch in some preparation. But we can see I did lose a game after castles, and that, this is something I might want to explore, that maybe I want to play queen a5 next time rather than bishop e6. Or you can look a bit deeper and see whether there are any transpositions that, you can see that this position has arisen a lot of times in my games for a lot of different move orders, and that actually my results for me have been very good. I've had 3 wins out of 3. So it does suggest that this alignment is probably a good one for me to keep playing, because these guys actually all have decently high chess.com blitz ratings, so a good sign for our purposes. Now, of course, you could also use this to check other lines as well, where, for example, you might notice after knight c6 that my score against bishop b5 is quite a bit worse, and admittedly part of that is because my opponents who played this have mostly been somewhat higher rated than my opponents overall that played d4. And we can see that I played a lot of different moves, but mostly relied on the move g6. And we can see here that, for example, after castles, bishop g7, that my score against rook e1 has not been all that great compared to the other moves. But again, sometimes that's because you may have played some games where you tried out some move like knight f6 and it didn't work very well. Whereas when I played e5, my results were a lot better by comparison, scoring 3 out of 4. But still, I might end up choosing to, for example, look at why I lost this game after d3, and then try to improve my play by analysing with the engine, or even possibly thinking about it myself and then seeing what the engine says for a bit more of an active learning process. And of course, there are other approaches. I might look at, for example, moves like bishop c6, bc6, and investigate, for example, what lines I score best in here. We can see that after rook e1 that I have the best score with knight f6 and with queen to c7. And so for that reason, those are probably a better moves for me to keep playing, and it will give me the better results overall. Of course, you can certainly add new systems to your repertoire as well, but this is just giving a good indication of what lines I should probably keep playing that give me the best results and I have the best understanding and knowledge of overall. And of course, you can do a similar thing with other moves where I already showed the example of d4 beforehand, so I'm going to take the move of knight to f3 as an example. Because knight f3 is a move that can sometimes be a bit tricky to deal with. Maybe, for example, let's say if you play the Benko Gambit, well, you can't really go for a Benko Gambit very easily against one knight f3 because they haven't played the move pawn to d4. Now, granted, if you play some system opening like the King's Indian, then of course you can just play like g6 and, you know, bishop g7 and this against pretty much anything if you want to. Because if they go like e4 and d4, well, you're just transposing back into a d4 opening where, you know, you're quite comfortable as such. But if you play an opening where you can't just easily adapt your defense to d4 against one knight f3 and one c4, then that's where you might choose to play it in a more independent way. To give an example, actually, I have played quite a lot of games with the move c5, and you can see that c5 and g6 have been my best scoring moves out of the moves that I've played, and this is one reason why in a lot of my recent games I have played the move c5, because, well, I'm happy if they play e4 because it transposes back to Sicilian, which is, after all, my main defense against 1e4, at least historically. But it also means if they play something like c4, well, we get a symmetrical English where, you know, after something like knight f6, if they go d4, you're kind of back in the sort of Benko territory. And if they go knight c3, you can see I've played a whole bunch of different moves, but most often have gone for e6 and gone for this setup known as the hedgehog with b6 and bishop b7, where you can play bishop e7, castles, d6, knight d7, a6, and just have a very solid position. And we can see that, well, my results have been pretty good, where I've won most of my games, and this has included games against some pretty good players as well, actually some IMs and some GMs. So yeah, we can sort of see from this that the hedgehog is a system that has served me quite well, but I might want to still keep my theory up to date because I have lost a few games and I might want to sort of look at why it is that I lost these games after queen d4 and then sort of choose something better. For example, I'm maybe not so happy with my results against d6. I might choose to look into the castles line as a different move order to maybe reduce my opponent's options a little bit and keep them guessing for a move as to whether I'll go d6 or not. So anyway, I think that's a pretty good moment to conclude the review of how to review your chess games. Just to give you a very quick recap, the key is if you're reviewing your chess games on Lichess, you basically create a Lichess study, you click on the opening explorer, and then you click on player and you put in your username here, like so. And that will allow you to review your games with the black pieces, or indeed with the white pieces by clicking. Or if you're reviewing your games on chess.com instead, then what you do is you just go to the explorer, where from the chess.com page, and you can actually do this on pretty much any of the chess.com pages because they always have this, this menu, as it were. You just go to the fifth one on the menu, the pupils hat, and then from that you click on the bottom one, explorer, and as you can see it takes you in, and then once you are in there, all you have to do is just go from master games to my games, click white or black, and then Bob's your uncle. So that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and found it very useful to learn how to actually review your chess games, because if you don't really know that you're making certain mistakes, you're just doomed to repeat them over and over, and that's going to greatly limit the amount in which you can improve your chess. However, by reviewing your games and seeing what variations are working well for you, and what ones where maybe you've struggled and need to maybe improve your play a bit, that's really the secret to building a much stronger opening repertoire, because when you learn from your own experiences like this, it's just much more powerful, and you remember it much better than if you're just parroting engine moves or just learning the moves just passively from a book. So I hope that this was really helpful and can really be a game changer in your chess improvement journey. Do make sure to comment below with your favorite feature of the Lichess Opening Explorer or the chess.com Explorer that I showed you here today. And also, as I mentioned at the start, it really helps the YouTube algorithm. If you like the video, definitely consider subscribing to get more of my Grandmaster Chess videos. We're really close to 1,000 subscribers, so I'm really excited to hit that milestone and actually to be able to actually earn some money from this channel, because that will allow me to make better and better videos for you guys. With that being said, I will see you guys in the next chess video. Get out of here.